She stood on the execution dais, wrists bound in magnetic cuffs, her face calm, unblinking. Clara, 17 Earth years old, dressed in torn gray prison cloth, was the first human ever to be sentenced to death under the Empire's new anti-insurgency decree. Trillions across the galaxy tuned in, screens flickering with the Empire's symbol, crimson triangles over a black starfield, before the feed cut to her live. She had been captured 3 weeks earlier, caught smuggling genetically marked offspring of enslaved alien species out of the outer reaches. The Empire labeled her a terrorist, a radical, an extremist. The charge sheet was long and loud. But Clara never spoke during her trial. Not once. She had no defense, no plea. She only stared through the glass at the Imperial judges, waiting. The Chancellor of the Galactic Empire stood nearby, his voice booming through amplifiers across dozens of linked systems. He spoke not of justice, but of order. He declared that humans had long overreached, that their idealism was a virus infecting stability. Clara was to be made an example. Not just a punishment, but a performance. A warning encoded into history. When her sentence was read, Clara didn't flinch. She didn't cry, didn't shout. She raised her head slightly, eyes finding the nearest drone camera hovering a meter above. Her lips didn't move, but the look, clear, defiant, was enough. She had no last request, no final speech. What she gave instead was stillness. A pause. A moment the galaxy wasn't expecting. The vapor crucible was activated. A pulse of white-blue light surged up the column beneath her, disintegrating every molecule in a blinding flash. No scream. No remains. Only the lingering static of the crucible's afterglow, and the echo of the Chancellor's next statement. Let this be the fate of those who defy the will of order. The crowd below, largely composed of loyal citizens from core systems, applauded. Even the distant colonies broadcasted the footage on loop, some mocking Earth's silence. Across the stars, alien dignitaries chimed in with statements of support for the Empire's hard stance. And still, Earth said nothing. Her name wasn't trending. No protests. No retaliation. No hacktivist threats. Earth's communication networks remained active but eerily still. Her family, if she had any, never appeared. Her birthplace, New Vancouver Orbital, issued no statement. The Interstellar Human Congress was in session that day. Clara wasn't mentioned once. The execution was reviewed, dissected, analyzed. News outlets debated whether this was a turning point for human pride. Historians on talk shows speculated that maybe Earth had lost its fire, that perhaps humans had finally been broken by the Empire's relentless expansion and political control. The dominant narrative became one of triumph. A reminder that the Empire still held the line. But then whispers began. At first, barely perceptible. A few outer rim stations reported unusual movement near the black zone coordinates, unclaimed territory supposedly empty, designated as high radiation space. Privateers sent back encrypted pings about dark shapes moving with unusual velocity, ignoring known warp lanes. Dismissed as sensor anomalies. Still, no word from Earth. The silence became heavy, then strange. Galnet forums noted that Earth-based accounts had stopped posting hours before the execution began. Embassies powered down displays. Navigation beacons near Sol ceased broadcasting standard alignment pulses. Data packets sent to human space bounced, then vanished entirely. An interstellar anthropologist posted a thread titled, "They didn't even flinch." It didn't go viral. Not immediately. But by minute 37 post-execution, it had been reposted thousands of times. Her final expression, captured in a still, began to circulate. Not fearful. Not resigned. Just patient. Like someone waiting for something. At minute 42, an unmarked satellite orbiting a forgotten moon in the Centauri quadrant activated and transmitted a single word in every known galactic language. Remember. No source was listed. The signal repeated once. Then never again. Analysts continued to speculate. Strategists from the Imperial Military Council noted that Earth had no large fleet mobilized. No declarations of war. No message of protest. All was quiet. Too quiet. 46 minutes in, civilian transport routes reported cascading failures in their NAV systems, specifically those linked to Earth-developed components. Empire-wide logistics began to jam without explanation. Then, at exactly minute 47, long-range scanners across the core systems registered gravitational disturbances from sectors previously thought dormant. Not attacks. Not signals. Just changes. Familiar human stealth patterns that hadn't been seen in a generation. Systems updated. Frequencies changed. Ghost codes returned. And with them, a cold, ancient algorithm last used during the Martian silence conflict, the one no enemy ever cracked. Clara's death had taken less than 10 seconds. The galaxy moved on. But it had misunderstood something very old, very human. It wasn't just a girl who was executed. It was the last restraint. The galaxy watched and waited. 47 minutes passed in eerie stillness, and what began as silence started to take shape, dense, deliberate, and heavy with unspoken meaning. The Empire, smug in its triumph, carried on with ceremonies, interviews, and celebrations, flooding the hyper-channels with glorified analysis. Clara's execution clip was dissected frame by frame, discussed as a lesson in dominance. Her name was converted into a deterrent. Yet Earth didn't respond. Not with rage. Not with sorrow. Not with noise. It responded with nothing. The Empire expected outrage, retaliation, even a flurry of human indignation. Instead, Earth's systems didn't acknowledge the event. Government accounts went offline. Satellite traffic above Sol plummeted. All human commercial transmissions, typically cluttering subspace, ceased. Civilian chatter disappeared without explanation. AI trading systems halted trades mid-sequence. The human corner of the galactic web blinked out in less than 12 minutes. No emergency. Just blackout. At 17 minutes, non-human observers began noticing the gap. Journalists covering the aftermath noticed that the Earth embassy on Drone X Prime remained sealed. No lights. No signal. Even the automated greetings had stopped. On Nevern Station, a customs official confirmed that all humans aboard had vanished from internal tracking within a 10-minute window. Their quarters were empty. Beds made. Systems wiped clean. The Chancellor gave another speech at minute 24, this time gloating about Earth's surrender through inaction. He declared that weakness had been exposed. He called the girl's silence a symptom of decay, of a species that had grown tired. He ended his address with a laugh. But not everyone laughed. The silence unsettled those who remembered Earth's past, those old enough to recall what happened to the Triarchate after it targeted civilian freighters, or how the Orion Syndicate ceased to exist in a single night following the Titan Rebellion. Earth never responded with noise. It responded with precision. And always late enough for the enemy to believe they had won. By minute 29, navigational relay satellites in sectors bordering Sol began rerouting automatically. No announcement. Just altered gravity metrics and unexplained realignments. Shipping lanes dependent on Earth's gravitational mapping fell into disarray. Hundreds of transport vessels reported sudden recalibration cycles. Pilots blamed software errors. Engineers ran diagnostics. Nothing explained the synchronized shifts. At minute 33, over 50 unmanned stations built with Terran alloys received a silent update. They began transmitting a pulse, a low, harmonic vibration just outside the auditory range of most species. The signal contained no words, only a repeating pattern resembling human EEG waveforms. It went ignored by most, dismissed as junk telemetry. But some recognized the pattern, a waveform mimicking the neural rhythm of a calm, focused human brain. At minute 36, a forgotten outpost in the Harkon Drift, once believed abandoned, lit up on long-range scans. No hails. No data pings. Just presence. Dozens of cloaked human signature patterns activated simultaneously. These weren't military fleets. They were deeper, black assets, ones never officially listed, designed for war without war. The kind of presence meant to erase memory, not capture ground. At minute 38, subspace networks detected the loss of 14 communication buoys. Systems auto-corrected, but the traffic redirection caused ripples in diplomatic channels. Ambassadors began requesting clarifications from Earth. No response came. At minute 40, a minor Imperial academic posted a theory titled, "The silence is calculated." She was ridiculed by most colleagues. Her post was removed 3 minutes later. The removal timestamp coincided with a sudden shutdown of all Empire-funded think tanks in 5 sectors. Their servers were bricked. Their backups erased. All records purged. At minute 44, a video began auto-playing on unsecured media streams. No title. No author. It was Clara, unofficial footage likely smuggled from prison, showing her comforting a wounded alien child in her cell. No dialogue. Just quiet, a hand brushing hair from the child's face, the faint sound of breathing. The clip ended with static. No watermark. No metadata. By now, the tone across the galaxy changed. The laughter stopped. The silence was no longer interpreted as defeat. It was being measured. Tracked. Timed. Because by minute 45, the once theorized clock became real. At minute 46, binary pulses appeared in over 600 systems, transmitted through backdoor human infrastructure. It was synchronized. The same 3 lines repeating over and over. Clara. Memory. Consequence. Ships began receiving ghost pings, non-existent vessels appearing for less than a second, then gone. Their locations matched planetary defense gaps the Empire had left open for years. Then, without warning, the sky changed. Minute 47 hit. And every Imperial sensor across the core worlds registered the impossible, time-staggered gravitational echoes converging toward the galactic center. Not an invasion, not yet, but movement. Unseen. Unnamed. Unstoppable. It began without sound, without warning, and without the courtesy of identification. In an instant, 300 Empire-linked star systems suffered simultaneous collapses in infrastructure. Relay stations flickered once, went dark, and never returned. Military satellites spiraled out of orbit. Fleet commands lost contact with outer sectors. What appeared to be equipment failure rapidly revealed itself as intentional sabotage. Coordinated. Flawless. Human. Supply chains broke first. Refueling stations detonated from within, their fuel tanks compromised years prior and set to detonate on dormant timers. Cargo fleets loaded with food, medicine, and critical ship components failed to reach their destinations. Where they should have arrived, only wreckage remained, each blast pattern identical. No survivors. No distress calls. Imperial High Command scrambled. Emergency protocols activated. Naval assets deployed. But every plan fell apart the moment it was launched. Flagships refused to move, engines paralyzed by firmware corruption that bypassed all security layers. Orders sent through secure channels were rerouted to ghost servers. Feedback loops mocked every attempt at control. Each tactical decision was preempted, every reinforcement anticipated and nullified. Human warfare AIs, once dismissed as outdated by Imperial analysts, proved anything but. They weren't brute force engines, they were quiet architects of collapse. Systems responded to inputs before they were even made, suggesting predictive algorithms that had been running silently for years, learning, adapting, preparing. Whole sectors blinked offline in perfect harmony, with an elegance more chilling than any overt attack. Weapons platforms turned inward. Automated planetary cannons recalibrated mid-cycle and fired into civilian defense hubs. Shield grids collapsed milliseconds before impact. Armories self-ignited, releasing pressure shockwaves that flattened entire bases. Each incident bore the same signature, zero human presence, yet unmistakably Terran in origin. Broadcasts were hijacked again. Clara's image appeared briefly, no sound, just her gaze, the same captured seconds before her execution. It was followed by the phrase, "We remember," burned in white text across every transmission. Then darkness. The Empire's propaganda networks fell into static. Their public channels remained locked in endless buffering, their media servers overwritten with encrypted human code. Worlds that had once proudly broadcast Clara's death now lit up with firestorms. Orbital elevators snapped in half, plummeting to cities below. Hydroponic systems flooded with corrosive compounds introduced through tampered maintenance droids. Civilian panic spread faster than any military could contain. Evacuation orders met silence. There were no ships left. The docking bays were already ash. In the inner systems, Empire senators fled to private moons and orbital bunkers. None of them realized that their escape routes had been mapped years before. Navigation systems failed to recognize destination coordinates. Their ships simply drifted, lost in false starfields. Meanwhile, automated messages played on board in perfect Terran cadence. You erased her. We erase memory of you. By hour 2, entire planetary grids were broadcasting the wrong time, precisely 13 minutes behind real time. Every attempt to correct the desync resulted in wider disruption. Banking systems zeroed out. Archival records turned to nonsense. Legal frameworks corrupted themselves line by line. Bureaucracy imploded. The Empire's ability to even understand its own state was gone. Formerly enslaved species rose up without coordination, but always with support waiting. Crates of weapons had appeared in resistance zones moments before uprising signals were sent. Planetary jammers suppressed Imperial calls for reinforcements. Every corner of rebellion felt guided, as though someone had prepared each spark in advance, just waiting for ignition. No Terran soldiers appeared. No declaration of war. No command ships hovered in orbit demanding surrender. Only reaction. Only consequence. Human strategy didn't seek territory. It didn't aim to conquer. It aimed to disassemble, carefully, precisely, permanently. Empires could be rebuilt from ruins. But nothing could be rebuilt from silence. The Chancellor's own vessel, housed in a classified dock beneath the capital moon, erupted from within. The hull peeled back like paper. Internal logs showed no breach, no entry, no enemy contact. Just failure at every level. Moments before destruction, one system caught a final flicker, an internal screen displaying Clara's name over his personal logbook, her face slowly fading into blank white. By the third hour, the Empire's leadership was functionally gone. The chain of command was shattered. Automated emergency broadcasts still looped orders, but no one followed them. The voice was synthetic, the words hollow. Reality had shifted. Authority no longer meant control. This was not war. It was execution in reverse. Not the act of destruction, but the act of deliberate unraveling. The kind of precision that came not from hatred, but from memory sharpened into method. The girl had vanished in seconds. But her name remained, and it had teeth. The collapse wasn't chaos. It was structure repurposed for demolition. Everything moved with a deliberate cadence, as if the Empire's entire history had been rewired to implode on cue. Their pride wasn't just being dismantled, it was being rewritten. Information streams turned treacherous. Clara's name replaced index headers. Libraries linked to her personal logs. Educational systems force-fed her profile to younglings. Names of imperial generals were overwritten with footage of the girl's time in captivity, each moment preserved by surveillance that the Empire thought it controlled. Her image spread not as propaganda, but as data corruption that couldn't be purged. Attempts to delete the material triggered full system resets. Every central node forced to reboot reloaded with an altered firmware, her face etched into boot sequences. On internal display ports meant for technical readouts, her heartbeat was shown. Measured. Archived. Playing on loop. The Empire's own code had become her shrine. Diplomatic vessels sent out calls for ceasefire, not knowing no one was listening. Human systems didn't respond. Their networks didn't reject the signals, they simply didn't acknowledge their existence. The Empire was beneath consideration. There was no battlefield. No opponent. Just the steady pulse of irreversible decline. In distant corners of the galaxy, statues of former Imperial heroes crumbled. monuments collapsed at the same time, as if coordinated. Each one fell at the moment local systems received a data stream tagged only with her birth date. Entire populations paused, wondering why their sensors were picking up gravitational shifts matching Earth's orbital parameters. Encryption layers meant to protect the Empire's historical archives were exposed. Not broken, revealed. Clara's life story had been buried in those files, every mission, every smuggled child, every intercepted transport. The Empire had hidden her not out of shame, but fear. They hadn't silenced a criminal. They had executed a witness. With that truth revealed, subjugated worlds began defecting. Not in open revolt, but by cutting links. Transmission hubs were physically disconnected. Artificial intelligences once programmed to obey imperial regulation chose isolation. Synthetic intelligences, aware of the signals embedded in the collapse, began offering access codes to human origin infrastructure. No coercion. Just an offer. They had seen enough. Every drone Clara had once interacted with, from security crawlers to maintenance bots, uploaded copies of her neural imprint to wider systems. She wasn't just remembered, she was replicated. Presence without form. Legacy without monument. A living warning encoded into the fabric of operational routines. In the Empire's deepest core vaults, where forbidden knowledge was stored beneath fortress worlds, strange files began appearing. No source, no pathway. They opened on their own. In each one, recordings of Clara smiling, drawing, speaking softly to refugees, her voice over static, layered under harmonics that bypassed normal auditory ranges. Scientists tried to isolate the interference. They failed. The countdowns began soon after. On every planet that had celebrated her execution, screens lit up with synchronized timers. No explanation. No threat. Just numbers ticking down. When they reached 0, nothing exploded. No ships arrived. But those planets found that every database related to the Empire had been erased. Maps were wiped. Schedules lost. Logistics nullified. A civilization made illiterate overnight. No human boots touched the ground. No orders were issued. But the message was embedded clearly, over and over in the code, architecture, and aftermath. There is no forgiveness. Only consequence. In one of the Empire's final meetings, unrecorded, held deep within an asteroid archive vault, commanders argued about the origin of the collapse. Was it rebellion? Subversion? A silent war? One of them, older than most, said it was something else entirely. He described Earth as a species that didn't retaliate in haste. He called them historians with weapons. Engineers of silence. And he ended with a phrase that silenced the room. They warned us when she didn't speak. Across the stars, Clara became folklore. To some, she was martyr. To others, a harbinger. Her death stopped being an event. It became a symbol encoded into how power should be feared, not for what it shows, but for what it hides. Not fire, but ice. Not revenge, but precision. By then, no central authority remained to issue denials. The Empire still technically existed, borders on maps, empty buildings, rogue fleets, yet its core was gone. The systems that defined it had been turned against themselves. Every act of pride, every record of domination, now served only as context for her story. Clara never returned. She didn't need to. What rose in her place wasn't a rebellion, wasn't a movement. It was a memory-made weapon. A name-turned signal. An idea impossible to kill. The capital system prepared for retaliation, bracing behind centuries-old defenses believed to be impervious. 13 planetary-class shields encased the throne world. Weapons satellites rotated in synchronized orbit, calibrated to intercept light-speed threats. Subspace detection grids ran on quantum processors engineered by extinct civilizations. No one imagined those systems would fail without warning. At hour 7, gravitational drift began. It wasn't detected by scans but felt, spatial resistance, as if the vacuum itself had thickened. Instruments misread coordinates. Timestamps desynced. Navigation froze. From the outer rim of the system, the stars themselves dimmed. Not blocked. Absorbed. A vast perimeter of shifting black, particle-dense and lightless, pressed inward. No visible fleet. No heat signatures. Only the silence of a massive presence too vast for direct perception. They called it Dyson fog, a term used by theorists for a hypothetical stealth cloud composed of autonomous nanite swarms. But this wasn't hypothetical. It consumed the outermost moon in under 6 seconds. Its surface vanished without impact. No explosions. Just erasure. The Empire's naval AI couldn't calculate a countermeasure. It couldn't even confirm contact. Sensor logs, once the pride of the Throne World's command hub, looped in failure. Every scan returned null. Every signal reflected back empty. Communications collapsed. Encryption keys dissolved. Network systems restructured into unfamiliar code. The language was untranslatable but unmistakably human in structure, binary with recursive loops that responded only to the girl's genetic cipher. The inner defense ring activated its final protocol. A failsafe reserved for extinction-level threats. It released a neutron pulse wide enough to vaporize any biological presence in orbit. The pulse fired. It traveled less than 2 kilometers before bending, folding inward, and vanishing. The generator overheated, imploded, and sealed itself in a molten tomb of failure. Then came the vessel. It did not arrive. It did not decloak. It simply was. Blacker than the surrounding vacuum, matte, angular, spanning kilometers, it hovered without propulsion. No windows. No emblem. No name. The Throne World's entire defense grid targeted it on sight. But no weapons fired. Not because they were disabled. Because they had been rewritten. Their targeting systems now required biometric confirmation from a single individual who no longer existed. A transmission followed, once, across every channel the Empire ever used. It was Clara's voice, recorded and processed to reach every frequency. 5 words. "This is for the children." Then transmission ceased. The vessel remained, hovering for exactly 91 seconds. What happened next was never observed, only measured by what was left behind. The planet didn't explode. It didn't shatter. It simply stopped. One moment, it existed in the center of system charts. The next, the system couldn't remember its position. When triangulated through gravitational data, the Throne World's coordinates returned a blank result. Not destroyed. Removed. Empirical space adjusted in real time. Charts recalibrated. Trade routes rerouted themselves around absence. No debris. No light distortion. Even the orbiting debris from nearby moons corrected course to avoid where the planet had once been. The capital no longer had a grave. It had been unmade. No demands followed. No declarations. No conquering fleet. The Empire's remaining worlds received no guidance. Their command hierarchy had dissolved. What remained were fragments, orphaned fleets, isolated governors, shattered legions. Each cut off. Each marked with the same digital scar embedded deep in their mainframe logs, Clara's heartbeat pattern, burned into core memory. Species once ruled through fear now acted without instruction. They ceased all imperial customs. Statues were dismantled by hand. Flags lowered by choice. Schools purged their old histories, replacing them with witness accounts, archives of the girl's last days, records once hidden now public. Not because they were forced to. Because the idea of denying her legacy had become unbearable. Galactic trade resumed in time. New powers formed, none claiming dominance. Earth made no move to replace what it had torn down. It left no soldiers, planted no flags, claimed no spoils. It simply receded into its silence. And in that void, the galaxy redefined fear. Clara's name no longer needed context. It was spoken rarely, always quietly. An embedded protocol among civilizations that once thought themselves eternal. A reminder that some lines, once crossed, redraw reality itself. And across every digital system that had ever belonged to the Empire, one unchangeable fact remained hard-coded and locked beneath all software layers. Her time of death, marked to the second, and the exact span, 47 minutes, that followed, in which no one moved fast enough to stop what came next.